Okay, so I now invite Prime Minister to open the case on side government.
My preferred gender pronouns are she, her. I would prefer POIs to chat. If I don't accept any till the 6 minute, feel free to interrupt me. Assuming that I'm both visible and audible, may I start? My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Speaker, the reason why wealthy countries or wealthy individuals are wealthy in the first place is because through processes like colonialism or slavery and the continuous exploitation of poor people. As side opening government, our stance is that we would prefer a world where we can actually prevent board of directors from taking advantage of these vulnerable workers. In this debate, I will do the following 3 things. First of all, I would like to prove this. I would like to explain the spectrum of the companies that exist within our status quo and prove why at the end of the day we actually benefit all these companies. Second of all, why we can actually prevent exploitation from high board directors, and lastly, we will also like to prove why we can actually guarantee success of these companies that exist within the status quo. This is debate winning because we actually fix the problem within the status quo, which is the exploitation of poor people. Moreover, we can actually guarantee like the benefit that exists within the status quo, and that we actually have that benefit within our world too. Okay, so what does this look like? Okay, first of all, the workers would democratically elect elect their board of directors in the first place. Okay, we would like to prove one thing here. We don't believe that the workers would irrationally, pick a leader that is simply nice, gives them more money. No, we believe that this is not the case. At the end of the day, they want a stable job, right? So they would actually pick a person that has the capability of running this business in the first place. We don't think that they would irrationally pick a leader that simply gives them more money or gives them more freedom, because once again, at the end of the day, what they want is a stable job. Second of all, the incentive of the CEO. We believe that the incentive of the CEO to be actually nice or not to actually be nice to these workers exists within our side, because they want to be the head of these companies, right? So what they would do, we believe, they would run the company properly and actually don't exploit them or don't fire them within like 6 months so they don't get insurance, which is happening within the status quo. One of the clear problems within the status quo that is currently happening, for example, like CEOs like Jeff Bezos is simply exploiting people, giving them minimum wage and not even letting them report if one's injured or whatnot. Moreover, they're firing them within the 6 months so they can't actually get insurance or whatnot. I will take a POI later. So we can actually solve this problem within our status quo. Moreover, the CEOs would not do this, meaning that we will further prevent the problem within the status quo, and the CEO would run the company properly. Moreover, be nice to these workers, or don't at the minimum don't overwork them and give them minimum wage and fire them within 6 months. Okay, so let me explain the spectrum of these companies. First of all, there will be companies that exploit poor people, such as Amazon or like Tesla. Moreover, there will be companies that actually care for their workers, right? In the case of the companies that exploit poor people, once again, we will prevent exploitation, which we will furthermore explain in our first substantive. Moreover, for those companies that actually care for their workers, right, we believe that they will maintain this. They will maintain the system as these workers will actually be willing to vote for their leader once again. And before moving on to our first substantive, yes, POI.
Do you think that International Labour Organization is dysfunctional in order to decrease the exploitation?
Yes, because these CEO obviously do not want to get fired or do not want to, get ripped off their job, right? Because since this is the case, we believe that the incentive for these CEOs to actually, maintain a sustainable environment for these individuals do exist in the first place, meaning that your POIs is invalid in the first place. Moving on to our first substantive, why would we actually be able to prevent the exploitation from high board directors? Okay, so as we have explained once and once again, the incentive of these CEOs actually exists within our side, unlike the the other side, that we simply see, you know, like these high companies exploiting workers because they want to get the most benefit, because they know that this is the most effective way to actually maintain their job. Moreover, within the status quo, these workers do not hold any opinion, right? Even though they want to go against their leader or not, this is simply incapable within our status quo, because they know that once again, once, you know, they go against their CEO or whatnot, they would get fired, right? Or moreover, they would not be heard in the first place, right? However, by actually implementing this democratic system in these companies, we will actually be ensured that these workers will be heard. Their opinions would be actually, you know, their opinions would be actually valid within like the companies or whatnot. We believe that this is important because this actually ensures their quality of life from the get-go. Moving on to our second substantive way, we can actually guarantee success. Okay, so like these high companies like Amazon or Tesla or whatnot, they exploit workers. This is an evident fact, and the evident fact that the opposition simply cannot neglect in this debate. However, why do we still guarantee success even though we apply a democratic system? This is because, okay, so we might not have like, these CEOs might not have like individual profits. However, as a whole, we still believe that we would still guarantee like the society's success as a whole, because once again, these leaders would be capable, or like these board of directors would actually be capable of holding of maintaining their job, because these workers do have an incentive to sustain their job as long as they can, or to actually maintain their job as long as they can. They are not going to once again irrationally pick for a leader that simply gives them more wage or simply gives them more freedom. No, this simply proves once again that we can actually guarantee succeed in our side once we compel like the board of directors. So at the end of the day, speaker, what does our society look like? Okay, first of all, unlike the government, unlike the opposition side, we would first of all prevent exploitation of poor people, which we believe has been a problem for such a long time within our status quo, as these poor people do not hold opinion in any places, or as these vulnerable workers do not hold any opinion or freedom, especially in high companies. Moreover, secondly, unlike the opposition's case, where they simply where these CEOs simply care about their individual profit, these CEOs will actually have an incentive to care about the overall profit because they do not want to get fired, meaning that we would actually be able to create like this society, idealistic society, where we can simply prevent or like deter like these CEOs from exploiting these poor individuals. Moreover, we would still have success in our side. They're extremely proud to propose. Thank you.
I thank Speaker for that nice speech, inviting leaders of opposition.
Just give me 2 seconds. Am I audible? Am I audible? Hello? Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes,
we
you
can
are.
hear you.
Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The basic argument of the opposition side actually says that they wants to prevent the exploitation of workers. You need to understand that who are the main stakeholders of this debate. The main stakeholders are the poor people in the third world countries, the black people in the first world countries, and the homosexual peoples in certain degree of roles. So this is the basic stakeholders of this debate, who you are trying to save by electing the government, or who you are trying to save in the current status, in the current world, right? You need to understand that whenever you are electing CEO or CEO from the election, you need to understand most of the workers are actually white. Most of the workers are not homosexual. Most of the workers are not women. You need to understand most of the workers are men who are actually white, who are actually phobic to homosexuality, right? So this is the basic understanding, that whenever you are actually giving an election process, the elected peoples or the CEO or CFO will be only the people who are white and who are phobic to homosexuality and who are actually on the more of the ideology, right? So the majority people will be from the whiteboards, and in other cases, whenever you are actually picking up a white CEO, he is most likely to exploit more black people and include more white people to the company to gain more support, more power. So the people you are talking about in this debate, the main stakeholders you are talking about debate in this debate, and the main problem you are trying to solve in this debate is unsolved. I am not taking any PY, I will be taking it in the 6. So it is still unsolved. So what is the problem whenever you are trying to, what's the solution? You need to understand that there is a certain degree of zero possibilities in the opposition side to become a black person to become CEO. But in our world, there are certain degree of possibilities to become black people in CEO, homosexual people in CEO, because in the upper hand, whenever we are choosing a CEO, we are choosing a CEO on the basis of stocks. We are basically choosing the CEO on their capabilities, right? So you need to understand the board of directors in our world can be a black people on the basis of their capabilities, right? So in our world, there is a minimum amount of chance to black people to become a CEO, but in their world, there is not a single chance, right? So the people they are talking about in this debate is actually they cannot actually solve that problem in the very first place. So exploitation of workers does exist in both worlds, but in our world it can be much more lesser, because the black people are coming out, the homosexual people are actually studying, black people are studying way more harder than anyone, so they can actually have the chance to become a CEO in our world. But in opposition world, it becomes impossible. The second thing that the work exploitation is mutual, because in our world we have international labor organization and many other things which works exactly the same, because international labor organizations people are being elected by the workers, and even with the international labor organizations, the exploitation actually works in the very first place. Whenever you are actually choosing a CEO, it is not possible to stop the exploitation, because the CEO will definitely thinking about his own sake after the election, right? So this is the basic idea, and I still don't understand that how the election will be working, how the election mechanism is working. They are actually, is they are talking about 5 years, 5 years election day to day, or is or a election once upon a time. Once a person sit, they will be the CEO of the whole time. I still don't understand the mechanism. So there is lack of mechanism how they are going to elect the board of directors at the very first place. So this is the basic problems of the opposition, because they do not give you the mechanism how it is working. They do not tell you that what is the difference between international labor organization and the board of directors election. They do not tell you that what happens that in their stakeholders, who are black people or homosexual people, who are poor people in their stakeholders. So this is the 3 problems of the opposition side and basic problems of the opposition side. I hope they will answer it in the very first place. Now in our substances, first of all, you need to understand that a company has some policies to run. A company has some policies to run. I will take it. A company definitely have some policies to run smoothly. When you change the company, and by electing people again and again, and after some procedures, the policies will be changing again and again, and this is really bad for a company, because we see that when a CEO is changing over heavily, these kind of companies cannot grow, because of there is no particular stable condition on the company. Some people have different kinds of point of view to earn, and for the reason, whenever you are changing the CEO by electing the CEO again and again, it becomes problematic. The policies doesn't work on the very first place. Sometimes the policies will be run in a biased way, not in a proper way. It would be whenever you are actually having a stable CEO, you can see that there are some kind of friendly policies, or even if those kind of policies doesn't seem friendly, but it will work in the long run, because you can see the Tesla, or you can see very big companies having stable CEO and doing well. In India, there are many companies who have a stable CEO and doing well. So we believe in a stable CEO who can actually carry out a particular policy and run it through it. But whenever you are changing CEO repeatedly, those kind of company have no stable condition in the very first place. Second, our second substance. Yeah, please.
In your world, what's the guarantee that a black lesbian woman would be elected as a CEO by shareholders?
I couldn't understand.
In your world, what is the guarantee that a black lesbian woman would be elected as a CEO by shareholders?
I told you that in our world, there is a minimum chance for them to be elected by their capabilities, because Black people are actually coming forward, Black actors are coming forward, because most of the cases they are trying their heart and soul, they are talented, right? So in our world, we have the policy of becoming CEO on the basis of stock market or on the basis of stocks, right? So there are 100% possibilities of them becoming a CEO, because you cannot drop them on the very first place, because they have stocks, they have talent, they have many other things. Then there's a thing that white people cannot deny, right? So I hope you got the answer. The second substantive offer was in behalf of becoming CEO, it needs talent and business plan. But in their world, there would be a politics, because the politics actually becomes highly problematic. After becoming the CEO, the people, the CEO or the elected CEO will only care about the majorities. They won't be caring about the minorities who didn't supported him. He won't be caring of those people being exploited, being wage cut. And you need to understand, the CEO who are being elected will not be caring about those people who actually didn't supported him, will not be caring about those people who are actually vulnerable in the community. So this is the basic problem. The CEO, as if the CEO is not caring, we believe in the current status quo, all the workers are equally weight, and we believe that this thing is well good. In other words, the second layer of this argument is that whenever you give workers the power, it is more likely to happen as a political issue. Politics will be the main term to be a CEO, and there will be a lot of political issues in the case. My second speaker will explain it to you. Thanks a lot.
Allowing the speaker to that starting speech and invite him to begin.
Am I audible? Are we assuming I'm audible? Thank you. Okay. I'll start my speech. Oh, I prefer POIs in the chat, please. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm from the House. So first off, in this debate, what we have seen from the opposition is that their whole case is that if we don't have any elections, there will be homosexual people, minorities in these CEO positions without any sorts of mechanism. We believe that we want to ask why suddenly, for example, a Black lesbian individual will be chosen. And for example, even if we bite the bullet and say it might be possible, we believe that it is extremely rare and is not an exclusive benefit to their side. Now, in the off case, there are standing for the companies that we see today. There are little to no minorities that are currently CEOs because the board people are currently the majority. And we believe that this does not work in this case. No people will have other people as minority to be CEO since it is already set in current status quo. We believe that we look around today in society and we see how many other people that are not minority in these CEO positions. We believe that these stable CEOs that need to be chosen, we believe that we need to give a chance to these workers to be able to think and elect for themselves, and since they will be under the care of these CEOs. They also kept mentioning that we will not have stable CEOs and they will run out of the whole company. We believe that these CEOs will stay in this company if they do a good job. We believe that, again, these workers are not irrational. We believe these workers know when a CEO actually really cares for them. And we believe that they will do whatever they can to boost their own work ethic, and they will choose a right CEO in this case. Now, our third argument will be creating why this creates an inclusive environment in the workplace. We believe that first off, CEOs are not going to exploit them. It creates a better working environment in total. We believe the board has an incentive to make a preferable workplace for these environments, for these workers, since they will be voted out. We believe that currently there is a problem where these workers are not being treated enough, as our first speaker already mentioned, and there are already environments that can be improved, as we've seen throughout other companies, about these workers not being able to, for example, speak out about their own struggles, speak out about the injustices that they have faced, but currently they are being silenced. We believe that these people need change. They need to be able to have the power to actually create change. We believe that these workers need change and need a different method to create a better environment. And we believe that the whole point of elections is to allow these workers to speak up. And since all the opinions of the workers matter as well, we believe that since as these areas where the CEOs who will have lots of power at the end, they're going to be elected, and we believe that's the best way to give these certain power.
We believe that these workers need an environment where they can function and reach their maximum capacity and ability. We believe that the only way to do so is to create a place where employees can elect their own CEOs, since they have to work and they need to make sure that they have the ability to give important decisions for their company. We also believe that this gives them a sense of power and importance in their own workplace, since they are a community. We believe that having this that allows for better motivation within these workers, since they all believe that as the CEO has their best interest, they will work hard to do so. We also believe that providing workers a sense of power is important and needs to be in a workplace because this provides a natural check and balance between the workplace. We believe that it's important for the workplace in general, and we think that this creates fear, since this gets rid of fear in the CEOs and between the workers. We believe that since they will be mainly scared to speak out if we go as the current status quo, since there will be much fear that they may get fired, they will get exploited and so on. And the CEO is currently allowed to do whatever they want to do because they are in that position and their position is already set. We believe that to further decrease the suffering of the employees and get rid of this toxic environment, we believe that we need to allow these workers to speak out. And we believe that in current status quo, the quality of the material that these workers create comes from their power and the ability to speak out and increase their working ethic. We believe that since they need to be able to increase their motivation and happiness in these workers, we believe that they need to speak out in their own struggles. But actually implementing this struggle, by implementing this structure where people need to make further changes in their workplace, we believe that there's another benefit needed. These workers are the ones who are going to spend hours and hours in these areas, and they need to make sure that they have these areas that are well suited for them and they are able to make changes as well. We believe that these workers know what is best for their own working environment, and if being able to speak out will also help the company as well. By creating a better inclusive environment where the CEO is actually willing to listen to these workers, creates better motivation and better work ethic, since they believe that they are important and they're being listened to. We believe this also boosts the company in many ways and the willingness for workers to do as much as they can for their own company. We believe it's important for these workers to make it seem as if they are cared for and that the company is actually willing to listen to them, since they are under the power of this company. We believe that as giving these workers a better chance to actually speak out, we believe that this gets rid of the toxic environment and where they slowly lose motivation. And we believe that this further increases stress if they are not able to speak out because they are scared if they speak out, they will get fired. We believe that when these CEOs allow actually these election processes where the people are able to listen to the different candidates and actually give suggestions or feedback, then the CEOs will take this into account since they do want to get elected. We believe that these workers will be able to increase the quality of material that is coming out of their company. And we believe that further from that, we believe that they will create further change for their own company. And therefore, we believe that since our stance is where we provide a world where the CEOs are held accountable and will not take advantage of these workers, we believe that the workers will have a much better time in actually working for their company. They're able to make changes. Other minorities are able to get in these CEO positions if the workers think that they are valuable enough and will actually provide a stable working environment. We believe that the likelihood is much increased. We also believe that this will be stable. The CEOs will be stable enough to boost the economies of the companies. And we believe that therefore we provide a much preferable world. Thank you.
I thank you for your speech inviting me.
Am I audible, right?
Yeah.
Just give me 2 seconds. Starting my speech in 3, 2, and 1. One of the major claims which is being made by opening government is that exploitation of the workers is something which matters a lot and it should be reduced. In our world, there is reduction of the exploitation of the workers which does exist. Why? Because in our world, there is international labor organization, there is something like labor organization, or there is something like labor union which does exist, or worker unions which does exist, who are going to amplify the voice of the worker. As there is an amplification mechanism of the voice of the workers which does exist in our world by the virtue of International Labor Organization or something called labor union. In that specific instances, in our side of the hub, there is a clear mechanism by which there is worker exploitation which is likely to be damaged. If any CEO become incredibly antithetical, or if they oppress the workers in their companies, in that specific instances, there is International Labor Organization which is going to give some degree of like pressurization to the CEOs, or there is labor unions which is going to like put some degree of coercion to the CEOs, or they're going to make the CEOs accountable. Why this thing matters a lot? This thing matters a lot because we see the systems like United States of America where these organizations are something which is incredibly functional. I'm not taking, I'll take in 6 minutes. In this, we see the United States of America, where in most of the cases, it's like these organizations are functionizing in the best way. In those specific instances, if any workers, if there is something of like exploitation to the worker which happens, in those specific instances, companies are going to get something of negative marking or negative point by the government to begin with. If this negative point is going to be increased, in that specific instances, these corporations are going to be bailed out, right? So in that specific instances, there is some degree of marketing process to these corporations which does exist based on how good they are to the worker. If they become incredibly bad to the worker, they're going to be bailed out because they're going to get higher amount of negative points by the government, right? So the entire ideas which is being made by opening government that exploitation is going to be increased is something which is quite trivial or quite like less in our world, because there is like alternative mechanism to combat with like things like exploitation, right? Secondarily, what opening government said that CEOs are going to be nice to them. Companies profit, they're going to like cater to companies' profit over own profit. There is some degree of politics or other things which does exist in order to electing these things. So no democratic model is the most perfect one. So here, the democratic model which is being like proposed by them is not going to be that perfect. So let's moving on to our materials. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you how exactly popularity will be the primary reason or primary incentive or primary benchmark by which these like CEOs are going to be elected rather than their academic excellence or talent or meritocracy. But secondarily, I'm going to talk to you how exactly there is a cycle of inequality or cycle of lesser participation from minority community which is likely to be created. And I'm going to thirdly explain to you how unperfect democratic model is going to make the entire situation terrible. Firstly, why in our world the representation of minorities is something which is going to be increased? Before I start this argument, I want to say to you, we are not saying that in our side of the house, every problems are going to be changed. We are not going to say to you that in our world, the black individuals are going to get the smoothest way. Still, our world is quite marginal. Still, in our world, there are some trivial amount of chances to be elected. We are which doesn't exist in their side of the house. So moving on to the explanation of this argument, why minority workers will be elected. Couple of layers to this. Number one, in most of the cases, workers within this community, within this company, are someone who belong to the majority group. In most of the cases, as there is a cycle, or there is a cycle of racism, or there is a cycle of like sexist ideologies which does exist. For this reason, majority of worker are someone who is going to be white male individual. Why this is a terrible sign? This is a terrible sign because in terms of electing the CEO, these workers are going to be incredibly antithetical. They're not going to be vote a black CEO. They're not going to be vote a CEO who belong to the women community, because in most of the cases they're upholding some sexist mentality. They're upholding some like racist mentality. Why this is incredibly bad? This is incredibly bad because for this reason, when this CEO, I'm not taking. When this CEO is someone who is going to be from white majority, in that specific instances in the company, within the company, the stereotypes within the company, the cycle of less participation from majority group, less participation from minority group is something. This cycle is not going to be broken, because when these workers are going to like elect someone from majority community, when the CEO is going to be majority in nature, in that specific instances, they're not going to cater to the minority one. They're not going to cater to someone who is black. They're not going to cater to some worker who is someone like who is like women in nature.
Sure.
Why is it incredibly terrible? This is incredibly terrible because in that specific instances, In this specific instances, the sexual oppression towards the women to the company is something which is going to be increased a lot. We see how toxic the corporate culture is. We see how exactly like there is an exponential increment of the oppression of women to the company, or sexual harassment to women to the company which exists. The reason is as simple as that. The reason is lesser participation of women in the corporate structure. In our setup, the participation is exponentially going to be increased as this CEO is going to be, there is a fewer amount of chances to make the CEO from like minor group. In their world, there is no chances to change the cycle. Yeah, opening government, go on.
So your only rebuttal against our case was that you have liberal unions, but can you prove why this is true or probable when no companies within the status quo was held accountable for exploitation?
I've said I've explained this in the first part of my speech. So, secondly, I'm going to explain to you why popularity is something which is not going to be taken into the consideration, which is going to be taken into consideration. Democracy is the idea by which the individual who get major amount of voted is someone who is going to be elected. Why this popularity or the face value of this worker is something which is going to be the largest benchmark by which this election process does work. Why this is an incredibly bad idea? Because in terms of being CEO or in terms of being someone from the board of director, your meritocracy matters a lot. It matters how good you are in terms of making some decision. It is matter how experienced you are in terms of like advising or in terms of doing the administrative stuffs of the company. But if you're not someone who is experienced in nature, but if you're not someone who have a good CGPA in your university, but if in that specific instances, despite of not having this talent or not having this like investment analysis capacity, you are going to get selected because you're popular in nature. Why this is incredibly bad? Because this individual are going to make some terrible decision in the company for having lack of experiences. They're not going to know how should they make some investment. That's the reason why the companies are likely to collapse. They're going to make less profit because this CEO is not simply intelligent as he is being elected by the virtue of his popularity, not talent. For all this reason, vote for opening opposition. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for that fine speech. With this, we come to an end of the opening half, starting with the pleasure of my invite members.
Am I audible and visible?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. POS verbally, please, and preferred pronouns are he. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Much of what opposition tells you isn't really mutually exclusive, right? When they tell you something like, oh, minority CEOs aren't going to be employed, we tell that that's going to be symmetric on their side of the case, right? Before I move on to some of the rebuttals to their side, some characterization that I think that OG entirely misses out on, right? We think that OG doesn't really characterize to as to how these elections would function and as to what status quo looks like, right? We think in status quo, the board of directors are elected by the shareholders, right? They're going to be directly susceptible to shareholders. We think that on our side of the house, we have a democratic election for workers, right? So assuming it's a large company like Amazon or Tesla, we think that workers are going to be in the masses, right? You know, hundreds of thousands of workers. So we think it's going to be a large democratic election. So assuming a popular candidate gets elected, wins 70,000 of the 100,000 votes, we think he's now going to be made CEO or COO. And even if we look at the worst case of a CEO like this being axed or fired by the shareholders, we think that there's one outcome, right? Workers go on strike, right? Because we think that when a shareholder acts as a democratically elected CEO who won by 70,000 votes, we think that we see workers go on strikes, right? Because removing a CEO that has that much support is absolutely abhorrent, right? And some rebuttals to what opposition tells you. Opposition tells you like 3 main things, right? Firstly, that white people are going to be the ones voting white CEOs and minorities aren't going to be represented. We think that the logic behind this doesn't make any sense on, right? 2 problems here. Firstly, because an opposition's non-existent alternative, we think it's shareholders who elect them, right? The predominantly white shareholder, right? Big tycoons. I think for opposition to call us out on not electing minority candidates, I think it was contingent on them proving to us that in their world, a board predominantly consisting of all white shareholders would have no incentive to elect a minority CEO or COO. Second problem here, right? We think that on a comparative scale, we think the odds of a minority CEO being elected on our side of the house is higher, right? Because it's more representative. You have like 100,000 voters electing them compared to 12 white men electing a CEO who is indefinitely going to be a straight white man. Second thing they tell you about how it's going to be all about politics and it's only going to be carrying on majority interest. I think opposition needs to make a differentiation here between a political election and a labor election. I think that there are a couple of differences here, right? In a political election, you have taxpayers electing a candidate that best aligns with their political views, right? Because their best interest could be something like freedom to get an abortion. It could be something like gun rights. But in a labor election, it's about higher wages, it's about better hours, and it's about better pensions. We think that CG can see out that the majority of workers have similar interests, right, in mind, right? They all want what's best for them as laborers, right? Not what's best for them as Democrats or Republicans, as to how opposition would insinuate, right? So I think it's fair to say at the worst, the politicization is just which candidate they like better. Third thing they tell you about how they're going to be things like labor unions, labor organizations. So people don't really need to elect CEOs, right? Two issues we see here. Firstly, the fact that labor unions cater for a very niche industry, right? They cater for industries like public steel workers, educators, and more backbreaking industrial work, right? I think when we talk about like larger companies in today's debate, we're looking at more large scale, right? We're looking at Amazon, Tesla, Walmart, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. I mean, the last time I didn't really see workers from Goldman Sachs striking over sexual assault. We think this debate isn't really about like coal mines in India. Second issue, right? We think that even if labor unions were to exist within these large companies, we think they are largely ineffective in the past few decades, right? Because firstly, the number of unions of workers has actually shrunk, right? Although union workers still make things like higher wages and depleted pension funds, we think that the younger generation or the younger, like in larger scale companies, it doesn't really function, right? And assuming that these labor workers once again were to exist engaging with their best case, we think that these labor unions aren't really going to be that effective within large companies. Right? Take a look at like Amazon, right? Where you had leaders like Chris Smalls actually staging walkouts during the pandemic, but he was fired within the very same day. These companies are able to do so because they have such large political grabs, right? They're able to unlawfully terminate people because they wouldn't actually be held legally accountable. Now, moving on to my first argument on how we improve worker welfare outside the house. Let's clarify what worker welfare looks like, right? Basically, this welfare, we're talking about our wages and other things such as general benefits like health benefits given to these workers. What does worker welfare look like in status quo? They can look like Amazon workers having to pee in water bottles and Coke cans, and Tesla workers being severely underpaid. Bonuses are practically not there, and their wages are cut, which usually leads to severe financial problems for these workers. We think that since workers now have the power to elect their chosen candidate, we think this leads to two impacts. Workers now seize their own well-being by able to use democratic means and democratic systems, which allow them to choose a favorable leader, right? Which is likely to make their welfare way better. This means that these workers are going to vote for someone who has their best interest in mind. This leads to boundless progression in the type of workers' welfare we see in status quo, right? Looks like them having better pay and better health benefits because we think that they voted in a person who have genuine intention for these workers. We think that workers now will have the ability to overthrow overbearing board members who rule with an iron fist, right? Which they basically couldn't care less about the workers and work them, exploit them. However, through implementing the system, we're now able to give the political weapons of power that enable these workers to topple these like abusive individuals. Why do we think this is good, right? We think that we can now implement a system that genuinely help these workers by giving them the ability to vote in members who are genuinely pro worker welfare, right? And the panel of positive impacts are basically limitless, right? In which they can now have a much more better life, right? We think the workers are the predominant stakeholders in this debate. We think they can now overthrow individuals in positions of power who basically have to work, who basically make them work for profit and will exploit and work these workers using unethical means and provide them with horrible compensation. Before I move on to my next argument, any POIs? No POIs? All agreed? Okay. Second argument on how workers will be able to hire a more trustworthy board of directors. Why is this true? We think in status quo, well, when the board of directors are elected by a group of shareholders, the incentive here is profit. It's all about making the most amount of money. We think that it's fair to say that this incentive structure mainly exists because shareholders have large stakes in these companies. So they obviously want to make the most amount of money. But recognize that the pursuit for making the most amount of money is something that doesn't line up with two factors. Firstly, worker welfare, and secondly, ethics. On ethics, right? We think in large companies like Tesla, British Petroleum, and Amazon, we think that ethics are often overlooked, right? It's not a sense of priority for three reasons. Firstly, because this company is so big, making them less susceptible to the political and legal pressure. Secondly, because they have powerful shareholders who immunize the company. And thirdly, because they have CEOs and COOs whom only act in the interest of shareholders and often skew aside ethics. On worker welfare, this basically looks like the Amazon workers panel. Because this looks like hungry DOD members, usually in status quo, exploit and basically disregarding the struggles and their pain. And why do we think it's important that you have to prioritize ethics, right? First of all, and a very important aspect that all sides of the morale and mental health of these workers come into priority, right? This is debate winning because all sides basically neglected how the lives and minds of these workers are affected, right? But we think on back to ethics, right? On why ethics is so important in these companies. We think these larger companies overskew ethics to an extent so undesirable, right? We think it's like them polluting into our rivers. We think it looks like companies like Facebook and CEOs and COOs like Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sanders, essentially, selling their company, essentially allowing companies like Cambridge Analytica to infiltrate their entire platform and use it to steal the 2016 election. We think that when you have like these unethical practices within these companies, we think it's directly tied back to the fact that these CEOs and COOs are only reporting towards shareholders and susceptible to shareholders. But we tell them outside the house, these people are going to be susceptible to workers, right? We can guarantee, we can fiat to you that workers want what's the best interest for their company and the best interest for them as laborers as a whole, right? We tell that workers essentially want to see better things happening. They want to follow the lines. They don't want to cut corners, and they essentially want what's best for the company. And for all those reasons, you should be siding with CG.
Thank you for the kind speech. Hello. Okay. Yeah. I now invite Government Whip to conclude the government benches for us. And before that, one warning, guys, please have a time limit of 15 seconds between two POIs.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, wait. Just give me a second. So I'll be going in 3, 2, 1. The only thing workers in status quo have known is oppression forced onto them by powerful individuals in power. Opposition lost this debate from the moment they chose to defend the disgusting individuals who force Amazon workers to urinate in Coke cans and cut wages of the Tesla workers. They lost this debate from the first because they support the morally abhorrent side. So let me just go over a few rebuttals and like dissect the entire opposition case. They talk about how you don't compel workers and allow the free choice. Two reasons to why workers are actually compelled, and nor will like it be an infringement on choice in the first place. We think that firstly, workers actually feel like it would be an infringement of rights because recognize the average worker in status quo is in it of itself an infringement of rights to them, right? Because we think that they aren't being paid fairly and work unbearable hours, and there's no means of voicing out concerns because literally Devesh comes and tells you about how labor unions are ineffective in doing so, meaning that enabling a democratic means of elections would enable workers to have like a form of a voice or able to express their views on certain topics. Second reason is that why is it not compulsion? It's not compulsion. We think that taking our case of the worst, where some reason workers don't want to vote, they can just opt out outright because recognized elections have never been a forced system. It's been a completely opt-out system. This is the entire point of democracy and why is it so beneficial to our side. So they talk about how we don't clearly like characterize why do we get benefits on our side. But if this really needs to be clarified, I'm concerned because Divish goes on and on about how you're being like given diplomatic arms and about how these workers are now able to elect individuals into positions of power that will actively like help these individuals. So we're talking about them electing people who are likely to take care of them, like take care of the workers by giving them good wages, by giving them like good compensations and benefits. We think that we were given the diplomatic arms which were necessary for helping our workers. Then they talk about how it's a freedom of like we're infringing on freedom of choice, but this literally goes against what our entire claim is. We're supporting democratic means, which means that we're giving them the ability to express their voice and the ability for them to have the principal right of voicing out their opinion on something. Their side lacks freedom of choice, and this is one of the biggest reasons they actually lose this debate, because on their side workers aren't able to voice out their concerns about people who are like in higher positions of power. So let me just call out their entire side for operating in a vacuum because they basically have no counterfactual. But like they talk about labor unions, but pretty sure their member of government takes us apart. And this is like especially damning to their case because they're practically operating on a negative basis where they have problems with us trying to provide a solution to their failed world, but they don't provide an alternative or a successful alternative to the problem that they have at hand. This basically means they're practically defending status quo. And if they are panel, they instantly lose this debate because we can see how bad it actually gets. So let me just move on to the first clash about which side is able to give power to workers through like basically throw over oppressors and like generally help these workers. So their side argues about labor unions, but we already proved to you how big corporations are unable to actually able to actually suppress labor unions because they've got high amounts of capital and high amounts of influence. This was one of the main reasons that their counterfactual doesn't work. But we on our side are given political ammunition, which results in these workers now being given the tool that lets them lift themselves out of the torture that was put onto them by these powerful and influential people. Because you implement legal policies and democratic models, which if broken on a worst case will be severely detrimental to these exploitative exploitative companies, because now the CGS system will come after them. And now also labor unions will come into play. But on a comparative, they're much more effective on our side of the house, because when these companies blatantly violate legal policies, the CGS system is already applying pressure on them. But now labor unions have the power to show an appeal to the public that this company blatantly broke this legal contract, which leads to them not being able to get shut down by these large corporations, because these firms are basically too busy dealing with CGS systems and ethics boards. We co-opt their benefits, and that is the main reason their counterfactual doesn't stand and ours stands. I'll be taking that later. Argument. So our first argument about how this results in the improvement of worker welfare as a whole. What do we think? What are the extremely beneficial aspects that come when you let these individuals elect their leaders? Two impacts, right? So first impact about how workers are able to grasp their own well-being by utilizing a democratic system that allows them to select a satisfactory leader who is likely to improve their well-being significantly. This means that workers will vote for someone who will basically consider their best interests. This leads to an infinite progression in the type of worker welfare we see in status quo, because this looks like them having better wages and medical benefits because they elected in someone who has genuine intentions and interests of the employees. Second impact about how workers have the ability to dispose of overbearing and controlling board members who roll them with an iron fist and also don't care about the employees and basically work with unethical means to abuse them so that they can maximize their profit. However, by implementing this policy, we're now able to provide a diplomatic munition of power that will assist these workers in overthrowing these individuals when they practically vote against them in the masses. We think this was really debate winning because on our side, we were able to overthrow the oppressors that were putting us in misery the entire time. So why is it possible that our side were able to actually get these benefits? And let's frame this here, because our opening side completely misses out on this part. Since we are given this political ammunition, these people now have the power to actively achieve multiple things. This means that due to specific policies that cannot be breached, these companies have no power to actually control these workers anymore. So even taking our worst case in which these companies still don't care about these employees, but due to legal policies and contracts, they will have to abide by the rules, or they're going to face severe backlash from ethics boards, CGS systems, and labor unions. Yeah, I'll take it.
What happens when a company is at the verge of making choice of workers in the company, and why the elected CEO will not think about his own sake?
The thing is, the problem that entire side talks about how CEOs will not think about themselves isn't what we're talking about here. It's completely irrelevant because we're discussing what is the best for the workers at this point. Even if we take your best case in which CEOs don't care about themselves, but more likely these CEOs are people who have already got pre-existing capital and influence. They don't need the severe help that these workers need. You lost this debate from the first because your side defends the people who did not need defending. Then our next argument about how these workers are able to hire a much more trustworthy board and how is it actually good. So basically board members in status quo use unethical means and abuse the workers by making them pee in water bottles and using Coke cans as a urinal system or something like that. We think that they use unethical means to have a higher profit margin that leads to the active suffering of our workers. So on our side, why is it good that we are able to hire things? Morale is better on our side, and basically every other team neglects this entire aspect. And finally, ethics are better on our side, which means they use good means of actively helping these workers, which means the overall welfare of these workers is much better on our side. Panel, vote for our side and actually help us win, because the moment you support other sides, that's the moment when the employees suffer, when the moment the oppressors have the most power over these people who have suffered in perpetual loops of pain. And with that, I'll end my speech.
I thank the speaker for that fine